Who's got a parrot?
It's the bird emergency, and we've got some cockies in the background. I'm Grant Williams. I'm a bird nerd. On my, I don't know, over there is Dr. Maggie Watson, who is an ornithologist at Charles Sturt University, um, a bird nerd, and a bit of an expert on the content today. And down there, I feel like I'm on the Brady Bunch. um, Dr. Holly Parsons, the manager of the Urban Birds Program, better better known as Birds in Backyard. Hello, Holly from BirdLife Australia. But are we retiring the birds in backyards? Is that what's happening? Or
No,
no?
Birds in Backyards is still in existence. So it's kind of the program within Urban Birds that's all about how people can create bird-friendly gardens and take part in garden bird surveys. So it still exists. It is still up and running well and truly. We've just blossomed out to encompass some other programs as well.
Well, that's what we like to see. BirdLife Australia growing its reach. Growing its reach. We're going to talk about how to be friendly to birds. We've done our gardens one. We've done our sort of plant selection, and we've done our hollows. Today it's about how can you do the right thing if you do have to get rid of some pests in your domestic situation, and further agricultural or horticultural, your factory, whatever. And of course, there was quite a bit of conversation about rodenticides and what was planned. So perhaps who wants to introduce that situation about the broad scale control of rodents in our current mice plague? You want to do that one, Maggie?
Sure, no problem. Uh, the house mouse came to Australia probably in the late 1700s, but the first documented plague was in the early 1900s. Probably there were plagues before, but people just really didn't bother to do too much documentation on it. Plagues are a way of life for a lot of Australian animals. Different types of rodents plague, different types of insects plague. It's just their response to the boom and bust cycle that happens here in Australia because of rainfall. So the mice aren't doing actually anything bad in that sense. But when you have a mouse plague that exceeds the comfort of humans, especially farmers, then you start losing a lot of crop and livestock and all the furnishings in your house, and they run across your face at night, and it becomes pretty disgusting pretty fast. And so we have a series of lethal controls for them. The ones that were developed before 1970 are called first generation, and the ones that were developed after 1970 are called second generation. The first generation poisons work exactly the same as the second generation poisons, except the second generation poisons tend to be much more long lasting. They're no more lethal than each other, but they're longer lasting. So first generation poisons are things like warfarin. If you've got heart trouble, you might take a little bit of warfarin to thin your blood out, and Coumatril. These are anticoagulants. They make you bleed to death at the right dosage, and they generally take about 3 days to work, 3 to 7, depending on how much you eat.
Okay.
Second generation poisons.
Can I just stop you there, Maggie? Because I know of a couple of brand names, and can you identify for us which ones there are? Now, in the supermarket, you see Ratsack and you see Talon. Are they the same active ingredients, and is one better than the other in in a
Okay.
domestic situation?
Rat sack isn't rat sack. There's several different types of rat sack. So rat sack double strength is the good guy. That's
Okay.
got warfarin. So you look for the word warfarin. That's the one you want. Normal rat sack has various chemicals like bromadiolone or bromifacin. Those are the bad guys. Those are the ones that stick around for hundreds of days in the animal or the dead animal. The other one, the brand name is you can't get it at the supermarkets, but you can get it at like land agents and stuff. It's called
Ag supplies.
Racumen?
Racumen. That's the other really good one. So those are first generation ones. They're very effective, but they break down almost immediately. So those are the ones that we encourage domestic people to use and farmers where they can, because they break down usually within 24 hours of being ingested. And so the secondary poisoning is much less.
So can I just get it clear? They're the oldest of the chemical compounds. So they're the old ones. So what are the reasons that people are pushing the second generation ones?
There's a mistaken belief that they work faster. So there was a lot of misinformation that came from the New South Wales agriculture minister, who said it works within 24 hours, it works within an hour. Neither of those are correct. It takes 3 to 7 days for that chemical to work. The reason why they were developed is because they stick around a lot longer.
Okay, and I think most of us are pretty aware of how to do baiting in the home, but the thing my housemate has got one of these humane, non-lethal traps, but he catches the mice in his shed, but he either lets them go or he has to kill them. How do you humanely kill mice that you have caught in a way which is non-lethal? I mean, to me, it seems it seems like Hobson's choice, isn't it?
Well, I used to work in a pet store way back, and we had to feed mice to our snakes. And as part of the RSPCA oversight of this, we were taught by RSPCA, not RSPCA, ASPCA, sorry, it was in the US, members, that the best way to kill a mouse or a rat, to stun them, is you pick them up by the tail and you whap them down on something really...
Whack them on your desk, okay.
Whack them on your desk.
Just like Sylvester used to do to Sweetie Pie and
boom, 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 boom.
Jerry. Okay.
And no, it's not nice, but it's quicker, faster, and less dangerous than trying to put them in like a tent with CO2 or the other more considered humane methods. I think there's a CO2 cartridge trap somewhere.
Okay, so that would be that they go into a chamber of some sort and then you gas them.
Yeah, that it's, you can buy them. I think they're prohibitively expensive though. But I guess the whole point, and this is what Holly needs to talk to you about, is no matter what lethal thing you choose to use, you need to make sure that you're not creating a bigger problem by having a mouse that's full of poison for 250 days, that's just sitting there waiting for your pet dog to eat it, or the bird that is scavenging. And that's the whole point, is finding that happy medium of how to kill mice and how not to kill everything else around it.
Okay, so before we move on with with Holly, because that's how do we stop the ingestion of the dead animals is going to be a big thing. But let's just get the brands clear. If it's a broad
Yes.
scale agricultural purpose, Racumen is what you recommend.
So agriculture, we're different.
Okay,
So
are they different chemicals or just different brand names?
I actually don't know what Racumen is in the agricultural space. I think it's the same. Elders told me that it was the same name, but I haven't checked that up recently to make sure it is the same name. Do you know, Holly? Is Racumen?
I believe it's the same name, but it'll be the same active ingredient.
It's the same active,
which is the cutamatral. Is the one.
Cutamatral, yeah.
Yeah.
So that is available for household and shed use as a little like square packet, and you just toss it around in areas where your domestic dogs can't get to it because they still will eat it, and it's still poisonous. But it's when your mouse eats it or your rat eats it, it goes into their digestive system and breaks down almost immediately.
Yeah. Now Racumen's also available as a paste. So
no, it comes in these little packets. They're pasty things in like a. So that they do have an agricultural version of it that is used for broad scale spreading. But the other broad scale one that's used in agriculture that you can't use in the house is zinc phosphide, which is neither a first or second generation pesticide. It's just stuff.
Okay, I'm just having a look now at an old Elders rural post from 2017 and seeing what it will bring up for control in rice fields. So what are they suggesting? Rodenticides, which is a late generation anticoagulant. The active ingredient in Rodenticides is diphenthioline.
So that's a second gen.
That's a second gen. So no, bad.
Okay.
So basically, you're looking for your first generation rodenticides. So the two ingredients you're looking for are warfarin or coumatrol. I can never pronounce that one.
Me neither. It's horrible.
They're the ones that if you have to bait, they're the ones to go for. And as Maggie said, in agricultural settings, there is also zinc phosphide, which is a rodenticide, but it's not an anticoagulant rodenticide, so it doesn't cause the rodents to bleed to death. It basically forms a phosphine gas in their stomach, and it needs to be done in open settings. It's got a whole series of risks around them for people as well. That if those gases open up and you inhale them, you're in big trouble as well. So it needs to be done in very strict settings in a broad scale agricultural use. It's definitely not anything for a shed, a confined space around the home at all.
It tastes very sweet, so sheep get into it and you can lose a whole flock.
And is it something that is going to be bad news for the scavengers and our birds of prey?
I think, like Maggie said, it's a bit hit and miss. I think we're particularly through the mouse plague in Western New South Wales, where there have been problems with zinc phosphide this time around, is where actually grain-eating species have got into grain that has been laced with zinc phosphide. And so that's where we've seen, reports of mass galah deaths and corellas and things as well. It's not so much your birds of prey then, it's direct ingestion that's causing the problem.
And that's poor storage.
Yeah.
I did see all the news coverage of the galahs and the corellas, but how about things like pigeons? Have you had any reports?
Yeah, look, they will absolutely have been impacted as well. Your cresteds and things that are getting along sort of spill sites. We've really struggled to get a handle on deaths. Getting some information on what's been found. It's been really hard to get sort of some official data on what's been going on, but there have been those incidental reports that have come through absolutely. So I'd suspect that there's actually a range of birds that have been impacted through zinc phosphide poisoning, for sure.
Okay, well let's leave broad scale agriculture aside for a moment. If you are needing to control rodents in your garden, your work shed, and your kitchen, how do you do it? How do you place the materials, and how do you ensure that the corpses, are not ingested by pets or other wildlife?
Well,
Yep.
you only have two options. The rat sack with the warfarin in it, which is rat sack double strength, and racumin. Those are the only two options that do not have the chemicals that will be passed on to your dog, to your kids, to the local wildlife. As far as placement is concerned, rat sack double strength, does it come with the? I've never actually bought it. I think it comes in a little
In a
containery thing,
bait
does it?
box?
It
Yeah, I
might
think it
come in a
comes in a
bait
bait
box.
box.
So the bait boxes are good, but you still have to be careful of your dog finding it. So you always put it behind or inside a pantry that the dog isn't going to get to. And the same with
Roof
the
cavity,
racumin
things
paste.
like that.
Yeah, yeah. Because they can get primary poisoning by eating it themselves, and then you have to go through the whole vitamin K pills for weeks and weeks to build up their ability to clot again.
Do possums like rat sack?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yep. So that's another, secondary transfer. So this is not always secondary poisoning in wildlife is not always necessarily the birds of prey or corvids or whatever, ravens and things eating the dead or dying rats. It's working up the food chain from, possums that are eating the bait directly, or, a powerful owl that's feeding on, another bird that has eaten a rat. Or in the case of, we've seen it in Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagles recently in a paper, where those birds are not eating the rats directly. They're, it's getting up into the food chain and knocking off wedgies. So it's not just that direct ingestion of the rat that's the issue. It's getting through the food chain by things that are eating other things.
And I'm guessing macropods also will, if they find it, they will eat it.
Quite possibly. I'm not. I can't say I've heard of it, but I'm not. I'm not.
No, I haven't heard of that. Yeah, I don't
No.
know. I do know it's been. I mean, we're not talking about the two good guys. We're talking about the other bad guys. It's been found in lizards in the Perth region. It's been found in insects that feed, cockroaches and beetles and other insects that crawl into the bait boxes and eat the stuff themselves. It's been found in those insects. So that means if you're using the wrong poison, it can spread everywhere really fast. Even was it found in frogs in that one study? No, it was found in snakes. A frog-eating snake. That's what it was. So when these poisons get washed away in the surface water and end up in the in streams, then the frogs are eating the insects that are there, and then the snakes get the poison dose from eating the frogs. So it's.
I'm guessing there's probably absorption through skin as well. I mean, I don't think you're encouraged to put your hand in a receptacle of pellets, and I imagine that frogs are ingesting it through their skin if it's in the environment. That leads me to another question, and I don't know if either of you will know this, but we know that it is poisoning some things, but what kind of monitoring is there? I mean, and I'm glad you're laughing because I'm suspecting the answer is zero. Is that pretty right? Like none of our regulatory bodies are out there sampling areas where there are plagues to see what is happening?
My understanding is the EPA in New South Wales was asking for reports of more than 5 deaths on a property during the plague, and then testing for rodenticide presence in those. That is the only, I guess, consistent testing that I know that has been going on by state government. I think it's mostly sort of academics and things that are looking at this and doing the sampling. It's Maggie, it's Rob Davis and Michael Orr in WA, really pushing this issue for sure.
So yeah, we're trying to get protocols through the Wildlife Disease Association so that vets who end up with these carcasses know what to do with them, and so we can start some sort of monitoring to see what's happening with all of these rodenticides that are being dumped into the environment.
Let me throw another curveball to you. Let's say somebody has been using in a broad scale application second gen poisons, and an authority or some well-meaning person collects the
Stockpiles?
Yep. How can they be responsibly disposed of? Not the chemical, the corpses.
Okay. We've got...
That's a good one, isn't it? I bet
well,
nobody from the ABC asked you that, did they?
Well, the stockpiling of chemicals is an issue, we know, because there are stockpiles of bromadiolone now. The New South Wales government bought a whole bunch of it, and
then weren't allowed to use it.
And then they weren't allowed to use it. So it's just sitting in a shed, many sheds, somewhere, and
waiting to catch fire.
Well, waiting to be dispersed.
Yeah.
So if something eats one of the second generation poisons, you need to collect those corpses, and they need to be interred under the ground, 6 feet under or whatever, for at least 300 days.
Okay, so no incineration?
You can't be sure that that's not going to release something nasty.
Yeah. So it's digging a trench, basically, if you've got a lot of corpses, because we're talking about mass kill events, aren't we? We're not talking about, here at home, I might have 7 to 10 mice running around. But if you're using it in a broad scale sense, and the wrong chemical is used, you're likely to have, hundreds, thousands corpses. So that's where I'm just wondering what does someone do if they know they've done the wrong thing, but they now have this residual problem of dead animals?
I'm wondering about zinc phosphide. If you burned them, I think that might be dangerous.
That would release the gas, and that would be pretty toxic for sure.
That'd be sparkless, wouldn't it?
But bromadiolone melts at 172 degrees Celsius, thermally stable below 150 degrees Celsius, flash point 218 degrees Celsius. So it depends on how hot your fire is. You could have an explosion.
So you want to bury them.
I think burying's probably the safest.
Yeah. So the same way you'd treat, a couple of dead sheep, you would get your backhoe out and you would dig a hole,
make a big trench,
and it's going to have to be deeper than any dogs or wildlife can get into.
And you've got to make sure that it's not in any groundwater way, because those chemicals will leach out.
So the answer is don't use those poisons. That's really the answer. It's pretty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um,
So the EPA has a PDF on guidance of handling and disposing dead mice. So they say preferred disposal options are via red bin waste collection or on-site burial. They do suggest, they do say open air burning, but subject to required approvals and in rural areas with no service. So they're sort of the three ways that they suggest, and there's a whole section in this on farm burials and what to consider. So there's got to be 2 meters between the water table and the base of the pit, 200 meters from surface water, etc., etc. So there are a whole. Sorry.
Decay time in soils for bromadiolone. Half-life in soil ranges. Half-life in soil ranges from 1.8 to 23 days, depending on conditions. Not readily leached into soils containing organic matter, so not expected to contaminate water supply and aquifers. So that's good.
That is good. And that's and Holly, you were referencing the EPA. That's EPA New South Wales.
EPA New South Wales, yes.
So for other states, you're going to need to check and see
exactly
what the regs are. I'm surprised that red bin disposal is okay. That seems to be something about convenience rather than being sure that it is not contaminating other bodies.
Yeah, for sure. And I can imagine for anybody in a typical urban setting, that's the way you dispose of dead things. You might put them in a plastic bag and turf them in the bin. And I think it's, I think there's a massive education issue here that, people believe because these products are so readily available on the shelves. Well, I mean, admittedly, I struggled to find a lot of these products during sort of plague season, even though I'm not in a plague area, because I think the word got out that there are mice everywhere. So everybody bought up all the rodenticides, and the shelves were really, really bare. And sort of, I think it probably goes into this sort of mass then concern and buying like hoarding of toilet paper. Everybody was hoarding rodenticide products.
They were.
For sure.
This morning when I went out to get my coffee and support my local purveyor of caffeine, I went to the supermarket and I was in the aisle with my camera about to take a picture of the shelf, and a employee of said supermarket tapped me on the shoulder and said, "No." So
that's a bit weird.
It is a bit weird, but there's obviously a sensitivity. Because of course you're in that bay with the stuff, the chemicals, the garden chemicals and whatnot. So I didn't labour the point, and I didn't go back and take my hat off or whatever and go and do it again. I just thought it was interesting. And in a former life, I worked for a garden company and sold those chemicals and placed them into supermarkets and whatnot. And even though we did have the safety data sheets, we were never trained as part of the company about which were good and which were bad. And that's where I want to sort of go next. But is there anything more that really needs to be said about choosing and using rodenticides that we haven't already smoothed
Well,
over?
BirdLife Australia has that lovely page that says...
Yeah. So we've got a page, it's actforbirds.org/rat poison, where you can get all sorts of information. It's got the chemicals to go for if you do if you do need to bait. And I guess in a typical garden household setting, leaving rural plague situations aside, I guess you need to basically assess whether you need to bait at all. So how substantial is the issue that you've got? What are the steps that you can take before you get rodents around the place. So is there, if you've got chooks like I do, it pretty much guarantees that you're going to have some mice and rats getting around. But, trying to go with sort of no spill containers. If you've got, if you're feeding pets outside, likewise, making sure everything's nice and sealed up, that you're sort of minimizing opportunities for rodents around your place. If you've got palms, keeping them relatively tidy and things, because rats seem to love getting in amongst them. So making sure that you're keeping things relatively clean around the place, so you're minimising the chance that you've got the infestation to begin with. And then if you do find that you've got rats and mice around the place and you need to get rid of them, nobody wants them hanging around, and they can be a health risk as well. So there's no problem with dealing with the issue. It's considering what your best options are. So do you have to bait? Go with some snap traps. I think that people probably go for the bait option for the very reason that we don't want the baits used, in that the rodents go away and die somewhere else, and so you don't have to deal with a dead carcass. It's not fun, but unfortunately, because of the vast majority of the products on the shelves of those second-gen rodenticides, the fact that these rodents are going away and dying somewhere else is a massive problem.
Well, that is the problem.
That's exactly it. So even putting them in a roof cavity, putting your baits in a roof cavity, great. It means the dogs and things can't get access. But if you're using a second generation rodenticide, the rats are going to eat the bait and then they are going to go off somewhere else. They're not going to stay within the cavity for the most part and die there. They're going to be venturing out into the garden and whatnot and be found somewhere else. So, looking at snap traps as another option. If you do need to bait because, you've got quite a large infestation that you need to deal with, then like we've been talking about all session, it's those first generation rodenticides. It's the warfarin and the cumatrimol that I can never pronounce, that one. Those are the active ingredients to look for. But still, as Maggie said, making sure that you're keeping the products away from dogs and kids. They are still rodenticides. They are still highly toxic. It just has less of a chance of ending up in amongst wildlife as a as a secondary poisoning event.
And have I got that? Can you see the ticket? The ticker that
yes.
I've got going.
Yep,
have I got
that's
that
it.
Right?
So you can go to that, and then there'll be a rat poison page there. There's all sorts of information. There's some of the research that we've got going on. There's a downloadable brochure. You can advertise that you've got an owl-friendly garden because you're not using those products. There's all sorts of stuff there for the people to check out.
Fantastic. I'm just going to edit that because I just grabbed. Oh, come on. There we are. Hopeless. While I'm doing that, we hadn't really talked about this, but I'd like to talk about some of the other pest control that people might need to use in a garden or domestic situation. Are we okay to sort of venture into snails and rabbits and foxes, things like that? What the preferred methods should be, or the preferred compounds?
Sure. I admit that some of it's not my area, but I can do my best. We know pindone is the chemical that's most rodents, or the anticoagulant that's mostly used for rabbits, and it has chances of secondary poisoning as well. So any of those things can be an issue. I guess with any chemical that you're putting out in the garden, you want to do some research on what the active ingredient is, and avoiding them where possible, because snails and slugs are not fun to have around the garden, especially if you've got a veggie patch, but they're great food for blue tongue lizards and birds and things as well. So you want to be trying to create a garden where the wildlife can do the pest management for you. rather than you needing to add anything in particular to it. So I would always look at anything to control those, especially invertebrates, so insects and things, as a last resort, because they are such vital members of the web of life within a garden, that there will be something coming to feed on them. So putting in anything chemical to control them as a last resort.
Now, the old favourite, snails and slugs. What?
Those pellets are incredibly dangerous for dogs and possums. They just you might as well be putting out the poison for them. Honestly, I don't know why they're even available.
Well, that's really the issue, isn't it? That I mean, having been someone who trained as a horticulturist and was selling for a long time, both in in my own nursery and working for others. It's just bad. These things are just bad.
Yeah, it's metaldehyde. That's it. I can say it. Metaldehyde.
But there's so many other things which we are learning a lot later are just bad out there in the environment. Glyphosate, we now know, is something that you don't want on your skin at all. I remember when Confidor, which I think is a nicotinoid, I think, pest control, which was a systemic. Now, I was working, for the company that was selling it in Australia when it was released in a beautiful green trigger pack, and it was marketed as the least worst kind of option. But,
the sellers of glyphosate, they used to they'd drink it. They'd say it's so safe, you can drink it. Yeah, there's a land agent I know who was telling me these stories. Back in the 80s, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, so safe, you can drink it."
Well,
how'd that work out for them?
Yeah, I don't know.
When I was working in horticulture, in maintenance horticulture, and also production horticulture, if we were using fungicides, we would kit right up. The suit, the tissue suit, then the plastic waterproof suit, the visor, the breathing apparatus, but never when we were using glyphosate. I mean, glyphosate, you'd wear maybe gloves, maybe some goggles, but not the full rest.
No, you'd be striding around in your thongs.
Yeah. And also all the kind of old remedies, copper sulfate and all those kind of things for your fruit trees and whatnot. We were just very, very careless about things. And I must say, even though I've been a bird lover since I was a kid, I didn't give any of these issues very deep thought when I was working in that industry, because you just get sucked into it, which I guess is why
it's the marketing.
Which is why we're talking about it now, and I'll talk about it until the day I die, about what people are using and doing, even if it is less harmful.
It's all about money.
Even if you can use the friendliest product possible, it's still better to not use any. It's better to use some other form of intervention if you can.
Especially if you're around the home, there's generally a really safe alternative. Send your kid out with a bucket to gather up some snails and have a bit of fun. There's ways to manage these issues for the most part.
Some ducks. Get some
Yeah.
ducks.
Get some ducks.
That'll get rid of your snail problem real quick. What, Maggie? We haven't prepared for this. We haven't talked about it before, but what are some of the really bad compounds that are commonly available for, say, horticultural use that you would say to people just totally avoid?
Well, I don't know if you remember Peter Cundall from.
I do remember Peter Cundall,
yes.
the fantastic Tasmanian ABC gardener.
I love the man.
Same. He was a hero of mine.
Everything that I learned about gardening, I learned from him. So as a gardener, it's like basically, if you can't pick it off by yourself, then you grab the bad guy and you crush it up and you spray it on there to make things go away. You cultivate the insects that will eat the insects that you're trying to deal with. Fungus. There's always some other alternative. So I'd pretty much say don't use any chemicals at all in your garden, because it's just not worth the risk. We just don't have enough information in terms of the risk of any chemical that's available, mostly because a lot of these are used. Sorry, I was just reading the thing. A lot of these are chemicals that were developed so long ago, before we had the data sheets, before we even investigated it. It's just stuff that you used from the 1940s, and it works. It's a bit like aspirin. So if someone discovered aspirin today and tried to get it registered as a drug, it would never make it because it's so dangerous.
Tess, welcome aboard. Thanks for your comment. I nearly chuckled when we're talking about dead things in the local cemetery. Pindone being used in local cemetery to take out rabbits.
So the carrot lacing thing has been a big problem in this area here. I'm in Albury region. So in the 70s and 80s, a huge carrot lacing program was done, and there are farms still today that don't have any possums left because they were all killed by pindone.
Well, just struggling for words a bit, because I wonder why that is a method that is preferred for rabbits. Is it just because of the cost of mechanical control, ripping or collapsing warrens and whatnot? Are the pellets into warrens a better control measure than poisoning with pindone and laying baits for them? Do we have a view on rabbit control?
I think
Khaleesi works really well.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I don't think I can really speak for land managers that decide to employ that method. I would suggest that it probably is a more cost-effective tool, because you can put them out and walk away. You don't have to, be out there for hours, with heavy machinery and things. And, somewhere in an urban setting like that, it's probably not possible to get, sort of the machinery and things in, or, you can't do you can't do shooting or anything like that in those sort of settings. So it's probably a combination of the cost and the time to deploy baits versus other methods, as well as the restrictions when you're working in an urban setting of what you can actually get on ground to do, I would suggest.
But yes, the secondary poisoning is a huge risk
Yep.
in using pindone. And yes, the blue tongues, possums, anything can
Bandicoots,
get in.
anything
Bandicoots.
that's, yep.
Well, I'd even probably push it a bit further. My neighbours throw their leftover dinner in the park. I throw out seed. My neighbours throw out noodles and whatnot. They also throw out vegetables, and the local cockatoos love carrots.
Mhm.
They love
Yep.
carrots. So I certainly wouldn't like to be seeing people throwing out carrots into areas where galahs and cockatoos might be hanging out. And I imagine if the pieces are small enough, your currawongs and crows are all going to get into it, ravens and whatnot too. So,
For sure.
Yep.
so yeah. I mean, look, it's a vexed problem, isn't it? Because we don't want the pest, but sometimes, you know, are rabbits in a cemetery really that bad? I mean,
Well, it's because they're European rabbits. So European rabbits burrow and they make warrens. If the forefathers had brought in American rabbits who don't do that, then you wouldn't be having this discussion.
let's go to another monumental disaster mistake: foxes.
So the Victorian Acclimatization Society has
They
a
have
lot
a lot
to answer for.
Mhm.
Blackberries, weeping willows, foxes. I think they introduced monkeys to one area.
Blackbirds, of course.
Yep.
Blackbirds, yeah.
We got our sparrows. I mean,
Sparrows.
Don't leave the sparrows out.
Starlings.
Yeah. And look, I'm far less of a hater on the introduced birds than I used to be when I was younger. And in fact, I did see someone's post on Twitter that Mr. Dooley commented on about the song thrush. I quite like the song thrush, but I'd much rather.
But there's only a handful of them left, so.
Well, that's right. But I'd much rather have the ground thrush hanging around than the song thrush and the blackbird. I'd like some whistlers, please, over here.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah.
I mean, we don't even have yellow robins here. So foxes. What if somebody needs to get into fox control? Now, I only know of fox off. What can you tell me about that, Maggie?
So there's two ways of getting, well, three, I guess, if you three ways of getting rid of a fox. One, you kill it with a bait, like a 1080 or whatever sort of thing, which is problematic in some ways because it's not the nicest death on the planet. What's
having your brain blown out by a 202 bullet?
It's quick. So if we're talking about humane, we were talking about quick death. Sharpshooter, they very rarely miss. I've seen pig shooters go after cats, and they can take out 20 feral cats from a helicopter. And it's the most amazing thing to see. Anyway, so sharpshooting really isn't an option.
In a morbid kind of way.
In a morbid kind of way.
Yeah, in a morbid, awful kind of way. Yeah, but you are cleaning up the environment.
So the other one, so fox off is 1080. On the one hand, it's not bad because it is derived from natural chemicals. It breaks down easily. But on the other hand, it's not a nice death, and you always risk domestic dogs getting into it. There is a chemical that was developed on Phillip Island that I still haven't seen used widely. That is an abortifactant. So an abortifactant, it's a canine abortifactant. So it's like it's put in a bait, the animal eats it, and if they happen to be a canine, like a fox or a dog, then all their pups abort. And so you kill by attrition, and it takes several generations. And so that's an option to use in areas where high risk areas of secondary poisoning for domestic dogs, because otherwise, I mean, you just have to put signs out as well saying, if your dog eats this bait and it's a breeding dog, then you're in trouble. You're going to lose your pups, but that's easier than 1080.
Okay. I've just done a search on Phillip Island for foxes, and yeah, I'm not seeing anything there. Just den fumigation. Now I'm imagining that den fumigation is problematic as well for those chemicals, I would say. Do you know what that would be?
No, I don't know what that one is. What they use there, I'm trying to find the abortifactant that they.
I'm going to Pest Smart. That might have some more info on that. That's the Centre for Invasive Species, so that might have a bit more information. Yeah. Knockdown cleanup. So they use three ways. No, not seeing the abortion method there. So
I'm looking on the
must be very limited.
Yeah. Chemical abortifactant. Here we go. Cabergoline, Cabergoline. Cabergoline.
Is that selective? That's selective just for canines. So, so cats aren't at risk.
Correct.
Okay. I'm imagining that's a very strictly controlled chemical, so that you probably can't rock on down to Elders or.
Yeah. No, you can't.
You can't. Good.
But it needs to be used in conjunction with other forms of control, because otherwise you're always getting new vixens coming into the area. So you basically, so an island is really a good place to do that, because you can shoot out as many as you can, and then you lay out the chemical abortifactant, and then that kind of cleans up any else, and you can restrict. So on Phillip Island, they've gotten to the point now where they just have one officer who's got dogs who combs the island every few weeks with dogs that have been trained to hunt out foxes, to make sure that none get across the island, the San Remo Bridge.
Yeah. Here we go. Tessa's given us another comment. What's she got? Oh, look, she's even said something nice.
Even though we've realised her worst fears. Sorry, Tess.
Yeah. No, it's when you start thinking about all the chemicals that we use, then you're just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, and I think the principles that I was taught when I studied horticulture are the things we need to always bear in mind, I think, and that's the principles of integrated pest management. There is no silver bullet, and nothing is easy. And if you can use the principle of tread lightly in any decision that you make, yeah. So sorry, Tessa's just given me another message there. I think we definitely did say your worst fears, Tess. I wasn't meaning to say that you thought it was good that we were.
Okay, so here
lacing carrots.
I've just read about the fumigation technique in the dens, and that's carbon dioxide. Um, so that's not bad, but the problem happens that you don't, because the den isn't, just one room. It's like
Yeah.
fingers. There's lots of
It's
fingers,
not
and
airtight always. Yeah.
it's not airtight. So you can end up with pockets of air, and it doesn't work. So it's a lot of work for not much gain.
No, I mean, well, fox eradication is very, very difficult. Otherwise, we probably would have eradicated foxes in the 70s when all the governments were getting together and trying to do it.
And don't forget, there's the Sydney Fox Rescue Society that we have to deal with.
Well, yeah. Look, don't get me started. I mean, look at all the money that's going into saving dogs in Bali. I mean, for crying out loud. Can you put some of it into the bloody Regent Honey Eater or something if you don't mind?
Yeah, whatevs.
Look, everyone, it's just, yeah. I just, we got some pretty serious problems here. I'd like the Indonesians to look after Indonesia, and look, don't get me wrong, I speak Indonesian and I love Indonesia, but please, can we do something about the helmeted honeyeater? Actually, Holly, let me go completely off script.
The helmeted honeyeater isn't a species.
No, it's a subspecies. Now,
no, it isn't. It's the end of
a
a cline. It's the end of a cline. It doesn't. This is the evolutionary biologist of me speaking.
Go, Maggie. Go.
Let's talk about this because this is one of those things where the issue about where resources should go is really, really important. Now, sometimes I say, should we even bother saving a species? Now, that's not a point I put out. I'm saying I agree with, but when is it important to save something? And the helmeted honeyeater, Maggie, go. This is controversy. I like it.
It is very. So if you look at the yellow tufted honey.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at the map of the yellow tufted honeyeater, it starts up north, and the range comes all the way south, and ends up in this in Victoria. And if you look at the size of the tuft, it follows this rule of what we call a cline. And it's a spatial gradient in a specific singular trait. So if you look at the yellow tufted honeyeater in its northern part of its range, and you put it next to the helmeted honeyeater, if you put them next to each other, you would go, oh, well, they're definitely a different species because they're so different. But the fact is that they exchange genetic material along that whole cline. And so you're just seeing one trait that's exaggerated, but it actually isn't any different than that one that's way up north. And so from an evolutionary point of view, you're not actually losing genetic diversity by letting the less tufty ones subsume the helmeted honeyeater. But that's kind of taking the long lineage look that doesn't necessarily sit very well with Victoria.
well, it's one of those interesting things. And sorry if you're watching just for pesticide stuff. But,
don't get me started.
But it's one of these decisions that people have to make, and I know it's drawing a long bow, but if you're a open space manager, what you use for pest control or weed control, weeds, that's next. That's next. Is a decision that has so many different factors that can affect it. I want to hear what you think about this, Holly. Which populations are worth putting energy into saving?
Oh
There's our
gosh.
controversy on a Klein.
Oh wow. Yeah. Oh, that's a massive philosophical, ethical, financial. Everything is wrapped up in that decision, and I don't think that there is one easy solution. It can depend on whereabouts you sit on the spectrum of your feelings on the ethics of saving everything, and knowing that that's not actually, unfortunately, possible.
No.
So I guess you need to as a land manager, or running a program, or deciding on what birds or other wildlife to save, is going to always be influenced by the people involved. I don't think there can ever be a clinical right answer for this. We are always going to be influenced by people's emotions, and that is ultimately going to drive decision making. Unfortunately, I don't think you can't get away from people's hearts in these sorts of decisions, and that can be a really good thing, and it can be a really hard thing as well. And so I guess that's one of the reasons I love my job in urban birds, is not because I don't have to make those hard decisions, because threatened species use urban spaces, but I'm not dealing with some of the regent honeyeaters and orange-bellied parrots and things that are in really dire straits.
And helmets and honeyeaters.
Yep, helmet honeyeaters.
They're not a species.
But I think there is great value in interventions before things get to that point. And so, I'm often talking about keeping common birds common, and, not dealing with hyperabundant problem species, but we want to, wherever we can, not be getting to the point where you are down to that critical decision making and things are in incredible dire straits, and you're starting to look at whether it is actually viable to save a population or a species as a whole. Those interventions need to be made way before that really hard decision needs to be made, and that's not even one decision. That's influenced by the financial, the grant funding that's available, and the staff that are available, and who the landholders are. It's an incredibly complex system, but I think that's one of the reasons I think that working in urban birds and conserving things in gardens is so important, because it's keeping things common and it's keeping people connected, and we can't expect people to care about and be passionate about, in the grand scheme of things, some of these little brown birds that live somewhere else. If they don't care about if they don't care about the things that are around them, that's their first interaction with birds and with nature in a lot of cases, especially as we're so many of us are in lockdown. That's our interaction, and that's our connection to nature, and that's really, really, really vital to keep maintaining. And so where issues like rodenticide become really important as well, because this is, like you said, Grant, this is not something that a lot of people think about, because these products are available on the shelf to deal with a problem.
And that's a perfect lean in to Tess's comment, which I did want to comment on, having been, hey, Tess, I'm an ex-Bunnings buddy too, mate. That was, a very interesting management style of Bunnings.
So one thing, maybe you can answer this, Mr. Bunnings. So in the U.S., we have this invasive ant called the fire ant.
Yep.
That came up.
We've got that here too, haven't we? Now,
unfortunately. The great entomologist E.O. Wilson discovered it when he was 11 years old in Texas, and wrote his first paper, I think, at 12. Anyway, so one of the best ways to control fire ants in your yard is something called borax. So borax is this chemical that we use to, you can buy it in the laundry.
Everywhere.
You can buy it
Yep.
in the laundry aisle because
Yep.
it makes things happen in your washing machine.
That's right.
It's really hard to get borax here in Australia. Why? It's perfect for ants. It doesn't do anything bad. All it does is kind of make them blow up. It's not a chemical that kills them. It just makes them blow up.
I don't know the actual answer, but I have a supposition, and that is borax is/was cheap. So why sell borax at $1.50 for 500 grams if you can sell someone something for $17 in a shiny, lovely trigger pack? I think that's the answer.
Dang.
And Tess's comment is spot on. If I could recommend to someone an easy mechanical or intervention to solve a problem, most customers wanted me to put 1 or 2 trigger packs in their hands, and that's exactly what Tessa said. Chemicals are what everyone wants, even for ants at the letterbox. And yep, having worked there and having worked for a major company selling potting mix and fertilizers and pest control and supplements and whatnot, that's it. There's a huge apparatus behind it, but every consumer wants to walk in and walk out with a solution in a plastic trigger pack or in a bag.
So you're saying we need to do societal change?
Well,
Easy.
Easy.
Well, people are still don't have compost heaps and worm farms in every backyard. So all those potato peelings are still going into landfill and still releasing methane and whatnot as they break down. We have not been able to counter the commercial interests in doing sweet FA, and I think that.
And that must be why bromadiolone is sitting in those silos somewhere in New South Wales, because there must have been more money in bromadiolone for somebody than the zinc phosphide, which had been already approved through the CSIRO work.
There was a sales rep somewhere banking on next year's holiday from that commission. I mean, that's a whole different issue about how things are sold and how people are rewarded for selling products. But unfortunately, you can't separate the consumer behaviour and also the profit of the suppliers and distributors. So we're never going to solve the issue until, well, it's the big thing for me is that you can't do everything but do something. So if you haven't got a compost heap, start one. Peter Cundall, go back and look at all of the ABC gardening how-tos.
He was the best.
And if you do have a compost heap that works, great. If you have one that doesn't work out how to make it work. It's not too difficult. And if you have a compost heap and you don't have a worm farm, get a worm farm.
Or chickens.
Yeah, if you can have chickens. We can't have chickens here, unfortunately, but we're allowed to have one, I think.
Oh, that's socially horrible.
Yeah, well, basically, because so many people around here have had roosters, and there was a fighting cocks and all that kind of stuff. I think my municipality just says don't have any. I don't think we're allowed to have ducks, but I used to have ducks when I was a kid, and when you got ducks, you don't have snails and slugs. You just don't have them. Harlequin bugs. I mean, controlling insects and controlling weeds are there really, really bad chemicals, Maggie, that just should not be in anybody's household for these two?
Harlequin bugs. Let's say.
Oh, well, let's say insects generally. We've got harlequin bugs are one that in some parts of Melbourne are really difficult. I don't think they do that much problem. People just don't like them. They're stinky.
So you've got the pyrethrum sprays, which are fine. Those are pyrethrum is based off of
Dandelions.
marigolds.
Sorry.
Marigolds.
Well, Asteraceae. A lot of Asteraceae family plants have the pyrethroides,
Yes.
or whatever they are. So yeah.
Anything that's got that sort of chemical in it is usually fine. Let's see. Rotenone is the other one. And that one, odorless, colorless crystal, broad spectrum, occurs naturally in the seeds of some plants, interfering with electron transport chain.
Oh, that sounds good.
That sounds good.
We should be able to market that.
Yeah. Moderately hazardous.
Oh,
Extremely toxic to fish and insects.
oh no, let's not use that. So
Yeah.
At what you're looking at now, are there any brand names there to be avoided?
Might cause Parkinson's disease. Nice.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
So
one we don't
rotenone.
wanna use.
No. Derris dust.
Oh, Derris dust. We used to use that on the cabbages for the cabbage white.
Don't.
Okay, yeah.
Don't.
Carbaryl. I'm just trying to think of all the names of the stuff I used to sell. Derris dust was out there. Carbaryl. Of course, you had Confidor. Or the aphids stuff.
There's
really
always an
nasty.
organic way of dealing
Yeah,
with these
yeah,
things.
yeah.
There's always another method.
Really, really nasty systemic things. And dimethoate was another one. Dipel. I remember working in grounds, Parks and Gardens grounds management. We used to use this thing called paraquat, which is just shocking. But they're still using it. That's paraquat was selective, I think, for I've got to get this right. I think selective for monocots, not dicots.
Oh yeah.
Horrible stuff. I might have it the wrong way around, but I think that was what we used to control like onion weed and whatnot, and I can't remember what we used for
Highly toxic to
dicots.
mammals.
Yeah.
Acute
it's
respiratory
horrible stuff.
distress.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Horrible
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So mechanical intervention with weeds is certainly the way to go, isn't it? And composting.
And that's
mulching.
one thing that we haven't really talked about is the other ways of controlling mouse plagues.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's go back to rodents.
Let's go back to rodents.
Since I managed to take us all the way around the block.
So the CSIRO came out with years ago a how-to guide, and I haven't been able to track it down. I found it once, and it's like disappeared into the internet ether. And they had this whole list of things that they had tested of basically, here's how you, first of all, you see if there's going to be a mouse plague happening. So they've got these like chew cards that you can like scatter around your fields.
How many you've
Yeah.
got.
Yeah, see how many you've got, and then you can run these like simple calculations of, okay, well now I've got to do an intervention. But some of the other ones are really cool. So low till or no till farming is actually really bad because it leaves the mouse dens in place. So if you've got an infestation, then you go and you deep till your land, because that then just messes up all the nesting, and farmers need to start looking at that now, because we're having an early spring, which means that normally breeding starts in September, but it's probably going to start in late August this year. And the other one that was really cool is something called a decoy crop. So the thing that triggers mice to go plague has to do with the quality of the diet that they're eating. So you've got this whiz-bang wheat product that's got a bajillion bits of fat in all of those seeds, and that's the really high quality stuff that's going to make you a lot of money. And so you plant your whole farm out in this stuff. The mice are like, oh, this is really good. Oh, it's got a lot of fat. Oh, I'm going to plague. And they start plaguing. But mice don't go very far. So if you plant a ring of really low quality crap food in like one swathe of your machine around your whole crop, the mice don't go past that. They're like, oh, it's crap. I guess we'll not plague this year. And
crap neighborhood. We're not going into this neighborhood.
Oh, I'm not going over there. It's not worth my while. And so then you don't. And so if yes, you lose as a farmer, you lose the that amount of your field or your paddock.
You don't have the cost in.
Surely against the cost of the rodenticides and the you'd come out ahead for sure.
I think that the CSIRO did that in the 70s or 80s. They did some field trials, and it's not 100%. Nothing's 100%.
So one slasher width, or one or one cultivator width is actually enough to deter the movement. Is it? That's amazing.
So two is better, but it's like a cost benefit analysis sort of thing. Are you willing to lose that? How many slashers width are you willing to lose to save the crop on the inside?
That's something I hadn't heard of. I'm kind of really surprised that such a small distance is enough to deter the movement of our little friendly rodents.
So a mouse won't move more than 100 meters in its entire life.
Wow. Now, again, Maggie, I'm probably stretching the bounds of friendship. I know it's not really your area, but do you know if our native species that occupy the same niche as the house mouse, do you know if they are similarly geographically challenged, shall we say?
So yes, and there is anecdotal information that they used to plague like the house mouse did until they were overcome by the new invader. So yes, there's a lot of mammals that are very limited. And so Holly was talking about keeping common species common, and that's something that we've been talking about for years now. Is you're doing all this re-veg, and you build it and you expect them to come, and that's fine for birds who might be able to cross that matrix of other stuff. But if you want to keep common species common, you're going to have to do some targeted relocation. The marsupial mice, lizards that aren't going to cross that 1K distance because they just don't. And you do need to think about it then about that sort of thing. So yes, there's a lot of species that are not vagile. That's the technical term for it. They just don't move very well across a matrix.
Just freestyling, that's how we roll. Wow. Yeah, exactly.
I think I need some coffee.
Why do you think it is that? Well, I was a kid concerned about all this stuff in the 70s and the early 80s. All these kind of issues were being talked about then. Why is it that we still, when people build new roads and stuff like that, why don't we have a wildlife underpass, a corridor, or an overpass, or whatnot?
You don't live in Brisbane, do you?
Mm.
No. Well, I know. We've got the koala things in some particular locations, but why is it that every major road redevelopment, subdivision, whatever, does not have just as the same as you're going to run pipes down your drains and in your services? Why is every road, every path not able to be safely traversed by lizards and you're going to put up a dollar sign. Yeah, I can tell. I mean, we know that. I mean, we know that is
Yes.
we know that's the answer. But I mean,
There's
a length.
You're
of
in the
sewer
wrong
pipe,
country. You're
a
in
length
the
of
wrong
sewer
country.
Pipe costs $11 retail. You know, well, it just astounds me that you can sell a blue-tongue lizard in a pet shop for what, $20, $30, but we don't ascribe the value to that thing in the bush to be able to travel across a road.
So there's a lot of research that's been done in this space, especially for reptiles, because a reptile doesn't view the environment the same way that you do, and so they've trialed different passageways for turtles, especially because a lot of turtles won't enter in an underpass if it's got too much shadow, etc. So they do a lot of this in the U.S. and Florida and the southern states because of the roads that traverse swamps, and then so they've found, and on the East Coast they've found a certain shape will allow turtles to go underneath. In Spain, they're very concerned about their lizards, and so they build overpasses. And in Brisbane, they've got that amazing one that is, it just looks like a forest over the road, and birds use it and lizards use it and snakes use it, and but it's just so new, and who's going to pay for it?
Well, the developer. I mean,
but that means that the environmental impact statement has to have it in there that's a mitigation.
Yeah.
But nobody knows about it.
It just astounds me that we have news items just about every night. House prices in Melbourne, record prices, and it's always good news for homeowners, right? It's terrible. It doesn't matter which side of the coin you look at it. It's good news for one sector. It's bad news for another. No, prices go up. I mean, surely we should factor in wildlife by now. This is what I get frustrated on, and I bore my friends silly because I'm always crapping on about why.
Well, you've got to find the ear. You've got to find the ear of the environment minister, the federal environment minister. You've got to find that person's minders, and you've got to.
Cares.
So, I met her.
I know
a couple of weeks ago,
she's apparently a lovely lady. She just doesn't do anything. The last environment,
but the West Australian lady. So the minder told me that the website of the environment minister, there's a box of send me a question or whatever. If you say, I'm Holly Parsons, I'm in BirdLife Australia. Here's what you need to know about rodenticides. And you do a dot point as though you were briefing the minister herself. Then she gets it. So it's like, okay, here's a specific road, and here's a specific way to do a mitigation strategy that will help this animal, this animal, this animal, build an overpass, build an underpass. Here's a link to a paper that has done it in Spain. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, so because I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to be I don't want to be the bloke on the sidelines carping and carping and carping. I want to communicate the solutions to whoever needs to hear them.
Yeah.
The problem that I find, look, I'll give you an example. I've reached out to a couple of the zoos about some of the recent captive breeding and translocation programs. Now they won't talk to me. Now
that's not unusual.
No. Well, but this is the problem. It's because they're part funded by government and they want to control the message that goes out. I turn it around and say, hey, you are part funded by government. Your stuff isn't state secrets. If what you did didn't work, people should know about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't reflect badly on Taronga Zoo or Melbourne Zoo if you had a go, but the community should know what works, what doesn't work, where the bang for bucks is going, rather than the best PR job gets funded. And that's my sort of problem with it. How do I find the information to then go through the minister's press secretary and all that kind of stuff? Because I tried very hard to make contact with the minister's office and invite her on the show. They don't really. I doubt whether the messages that they took have gone anywhere other than the round receptacle.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah.
It's not genuine, and that's why I roll my eyes and shrug my shoulders. There's no good faith. I mean, Holly, you might remember. I'm not sure, Maggie, if you do, but remember we had a Liberal environment minister who went and waged war, basically, at the International Whaling Commission. I think that's the last time we had a Conservative environment minister with a backbone. But
Keen, he's not federal, but
yeah, but he just took 25% out of saving our species. So yeah, Matt Keane.
But
he's doing some things, but on the other hand, he's a performance artist. That's
yes,
my problem.
so
you don't go, here's new national park, but I've taken 25% of the money that goes to saving the rare animals and plants in that national park. Here, have a national park, but we're not going to save, or we're not going to continue to put the same effort into preserving the endangered and threatened species that we've already spent 10 years identifying and working out how to manage. That's performance art for me. So yeah, Matt Keane. I've invited through his office to talk to me. No response. But I don't want it. I don't want any of these people to be villains, because they've all got the power to make change. Mm-hmm. So just make change, please. I don't care what badge you wear, whether it's a red one or a blue one or a bloody green one. Just
do something, please.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's incredibly frustrating. I don't know. I mean, and hey, I'm just Joe. I'm just Joe Public. I mean, for you guys who your careers are based on all these issues, and you've got to fight each other to get bloody $5,000. It's insane. That's why the developers need to pay. That's my view. The developers need to pay because that's where the profit is.
Sure. So there is, University of Melbourne, I think I sent you guys the link just there. So University of Melbourne, so Sarah Beckersey and Georgia Garrard have been doing a lot of work on biodiversity sensitive urban design and have developed this framework for how to go about actually creating developments that respect and incorporate biodiversity into them from the outset. And so I believe that they're working on a couple of sites in Melbourne coming up soon. Hopefully I haven't announced that on top of that they wasn't supposed to be known, but they've been working on this concept of biodiversity sensitive urban design for quite a while, and so they're now going to be doing some on-site practical work on it, which is really exciting. And so there's a really nice framework around how to go about creating great habitat for wildlife from the outset of a subdivision going into place. So hopefully a really great series of case studies of how developers can create these great spaces, working with experts in that field, with like on the ground, and creating spaces that people want to be in, as well as wildlife.
Now I'm just going to try and find, where are we?
So Melbourne, let's be Melbourne centric here, is actually they've done another initiative, which I'll put a link in here for you. So the City of Melbourne, realizing that the plane trees aren't the most exciting source of food for native mammals and birds and everything else, and insects, because pretty much nothing eats them. They've started this initiative of planting native mistletoes in the plane trees throughout the city of Melbourne.
Cool.
And because they know through my husband's work that mistletoes are keystone species in promoting diversity, especially in insects, and then therefore birds. So they've started this trial to high grade, I guess, diversity in the urban landscape. A shot of goodness. So go Melbourne.
Yeah. We're about to work with City of Melbourne on a project too.
Great.
Looking at how with RMIT and University of Melbourne, looking at planting of corridors for birds in some of the key parks in Melbourne,
nice.
and banding fairy wrens and things, and looking at how they're moving or not moving across those parks, and using citizen scientists to report their sightings of the little banded birds. Very, very lovely. Yeah, City of Melbourne are doing some great things at the moment.
Yeah, it's really good, and actually they've got a really committed team.
They do.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to study with some of the people in Uni Melbourne, City of Melbourne, with their in their parks groups. Maggie, you mentioned about the mistletoe, and it's not that many years ago that I was working in parks and gardens, and the very first things that we would cut out of a tree when is you'd get the arb crew out and take all the mistletoe out, and just simply because I don't think anyone really was thinking to. You're thinking because we were all focused on the health of the tree and the risks involved with an unhealthy tree. There's always that.
So the best way to think about a mistletoe is if you've got a dog with fleas, are the fleas going to kill the dog? No, because they're just living there. If the dog dies, you don't blame the fleas. No. So if a tree has mistletoe, it's fine. But if a tree has too many mistletoes, you've got to go, well, what's wrong with the tree, the surrounding environment that's making it so susceptible to its version of the flea? And just that train of thought, that didn't come about until quite recently.
Yeah, no, it was always. I mean, you've got heat stress because you've got paving or roads and root systems under those, and maybe there's been new cabling go through for the internet and all those kind of things. But of course, the problem is the mistletoe.
Yeah,
So
it's bad.
so yeah, in a way, it's really positive that the eyes are now being opened about all of these issues. But of course, with trees and whatnot, they take street trees that are 80 years old, take 20 years to die. So a lot of the time, you don't know that the damage has been done until it's way too late to save them. So, well, I think we've been around the block and back.
Wow.
Done a couple of laps of the oval as well. Is there anything that you think we may have missed out in our wide-ranging discussion? I'm going to put all these links up.
Did you put that link in for the BirdLife Australia fact sheety thing?
Yep, and I've got the awe.gov.au/lay/contact, that one.
So there's a contact me thing, and it opens up into a page, and you can put your very sharply worded, here's what you need to know about X.
Yeah, and then we've got Holly's one for the threatened species, biodiversity sensitive urban design, and
that's great.
That grassland certainly looks like near my place. We've got a lot of the remnant grasslands in Melbourne around here. And then your misunderstood magical mistletoes of Australia. I'm looking forward to reading that. That's an ABC link. And then you got a YouTube one. What's that one, Maggie?
I think that's the ABC. Gardening Australia did a whole thing on it as well.
Okay. Now, Holly, I know I always put you on the spot. I'd reached out to James about invasive species, the Invasive Species Council. So, are you happy to tackle invasive species next?
Sure.
I haven't got a confirmation from James yet, but he did say that he'd be happy to chat. We just don't have a date. So
that's okay.
I'm going to pop that again at him and see if we can get into it. Maggie, what else? Tell us about how you became Turn Girl.
So I originally trained in mammalian reproduction with the intent of becoming a vet. And I became a vet nurse and decided that I didn't really like how people treated their animals. They're really quite awful to. I loved working with the animals, but yeah, that was the end of a deal. So I'm like, was casting around to where to go, and I stumbled upon the roseate tern, which is in the United States an endangered species, and I did my master's on them. And when I moved to Australia, I did my master's on the crested tern, and they're the best birds on the planet.
Oh, Claire Greenwell might have a blue with you about the fairy.
Well, the apostle bird has to be the close second, though.
Yeah, they are very cool.
Because
Chuffs are pretty cool too.
No, because Lousy Jack. It's
a great name, isn't it?
It took me months of digging around to figure out where in the heck that came from. And apparently it comes from this story that was brought over by Cornish settlers. So they have this like fairy tale, Jack and his 11 brothers. And, it's like a Sleeping Beauty sort of, one of those fairy tales where all the brothers try and do something. And the Lousy Jack, the youngest brother, wins the princess in the end because he's got lice. And he uses the thorns on the on the hedge to scratch his lice, and he's able to get through and save the princess, sort of thing. And it was like, what? And because there's 12 of them, 12 apostle birds, and Lousy Jack, and I'm like, that is the best story.
Wow.
Wow.
We have to dig into that one, Holly, don't we?
We do.
My
goodness.
That needs to be aired far more widely.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So no, that's my my project is to track down the actual written story of this so that I can find out who Lousy Jack is.
Yeah, wow.
But they're cool.
That's a ripper. Holly, what's the latest birds in backyards kind of project that's going on?
What isn't going on? So rodenticides are a big issue that I'm still working on with Maggie and Rob in WA and within BirdLife itself. So we are waiting for some. Sorry?
Is the battle still isn't won? Is that
no.
Oh
my goodness, no. No, there is a long way to go.
Gee, I thought that the action had been stopped, but there's still the pressure coming on from the ag groups.
Oh no! So the New South Wales government was not allowed to use all that bromadiolone that is now sitting somewhere to be cast. I have no idea.
No one
what
knows.
The plan will be for those products, but they were not allowed to use it in the broad scale that they had applied to the APVMA, which is the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicine Association. They're the ones that decide what chemicals are allowed to be used, how they have to be used, how they're labelled, etc. So they're the ones that said, no, New South Wales government, you cannot use bromadiolone in this capacity. They have undertaken a review into rodenticides in Australia last year. BirdLife, amongst many other people and organisations, put forward submissions. One thing that we called for is for those second-gen rodenticide products to be removed from public sale. So we don't think, as I'm sure Maggie does as well, that all of those various Ratsacky, Talon, Big Cheese products should be available for individuals to buy, that there are
Correct.
specific uses for them in some cases. So we didn't talk about sort of island conservation particularly, but that's where those products are and have a place to be used. So we still want to see those products removed from public sale. That review has wound up, but decisions have not been made yet. They're still reviewing everything. So BirdLife is still calling for those products to be taken off the shelves. We're still going to be very active in that space. So that actforbirds.org.au website, people can sign up and find out information to be kept in the loop. We are testing powerful owl livers at the moment. We're waiting for the test results to look at extents of rodenticides in very urban powerful owls from Sydney. To see whether they are showing up in these birds that we now know are eating rats and, of course, eat possums. So we're waiting for those test results to come back as well in powerful owls. We've always got Birds in Backyards surveys ongoing, so people can also jump onto birdsinbackyards.net, go through to bird data and tell us what's in their gardens. And otherwise, they can follow us on social media, Urban Birds Oz on Twitter, Birds in Backyards on Instagram, or join the Birds in Backyards Facebook group. And we'll have a newsletter out at the end of next month if people want to sign up for that too. It's busy.
Bravo.
Busy,
Maggie,
busy.
what's your current project?
I am working on flat flies in swift parrots and orange-bellied parrots. So in my research world, I'm a parasitologist, and I look at ectoparasites on birds. So yes, looking at lice, looking at flat flies.
Okay, just
in the microscope. That way, microscope.
In 25 words or less.
Yes.
Flat flies are important because
So the Hippoboscidae are a group of flies that are found all over the world. They infest mammals and birds and everything, and they're blood-sucking things. But they run the very real risk of spreading disease. And one of the big diseases that parrots get is something called beak and feather disease. And so we're examining how much they share beak and feather disease around when they bite.
And of course, there's a episode of the Bird Emergency about beak and feather disease with the fantastic Dr. Johanna Martins. My next episode of the Bird Emergency is about a bird that lost the battle, the Carolina parakeet.
Oh yes.
With I did a great interview with Kevin Bergio from the New York chapter of the Audubon Society, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, we're talking more bird influenza pandemic or whatnot with Michelle Villa from University of Sydney. So we've got it's doom and gloom everywhere you look. Whoa!
Yay!
Everywhere. I've got some good news stories coming up too. We're talking about translocations coming up, and more waiters and whatnot. So thanks, Maggie. It's really great to have met you.
Thanks.
I hope we can.
Thanks for having me on.
I hope we can find a reason to chat again. Holly, you're the mainstay of these little conversations. Thanks for the people
pleasure.
who have been watching and commenting, Tess particularly. I know you two can't see the eyeballs, but we've been having eyeballs, so that's great. We even got got a love heart and we got some comments. So, and of course, there if you're looking at the screen, Grant at Bird Emergency on Twitter. If you'd like some snark and some sark, as well as I like to retweet as much birdie information as I can find from around the world. Just put up with my rants every now and then. I if I'm having a bad day. And this will be up on the YouTube channel if you want to rewatch it. And of course, the podcast version of this will be out very soon. And as Nick mentioned to me yesterday, he got through quite a few episodes when he was driving 2,000 kilometres before he went and took some photos of the black kite. So, hey, Nick, here's another an hour and a half. So what are we going to get? There's how many kilometres are we going to get there? I reckon you'll probably get almost 200 kilometres out of this one, buddy. Oh, and thanks. Oh, there's someone dropping in very late. Oh, and a thumbs up. And a comment. Hang on before we go.
Oh,
thanks, Natalie. I'm scared of birds. Well, everybody's got some kind of a nightmare. I hope you're not scared of chickens. That's all I can say.
Chickens really aren't birds.
Yeah,
my 4-year-old claimed
weird.
that the other day. Yeah.
They're just weird.
Dinosaurs, aren't they, really? So,
well, all birds are dinosaurs.
Well, that's right. No, let's not even. I'm going to say the cassowary. That's pretty terrifying. But what about Natalie's just said she's scared of roosters but not chickens? How about cassowaries and emus, Natalie? Just give us an update on there, because we're all hanging out for that. We're all adorable. Have a good night. Oh well, you're obviously on the other side of the world somewhere. Nice to meet you.
Very cool.
Thanks, Holly. BirdLife Australia, Urban Birds Program Manager, Birds in Backyards. If you want to check out the website. That's what I didn't tell you, Holly. This week I'm talking to Tegan.
Yay!
From BirdLife WA, and we're going to be talking about last year's Great Australian Backyard Aussie Bird Count.
Yep.
And talking about what we found out from last year, and what some of the hopes are for this year. And Natalie,
Yeah, it's
from
coming up
Arizona.
quick.
Ripper.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.